Is Tampa really becoming the new Miami? Does that mean there's going to be a Cuban pastry shop on every corner? Because then I'd definitely move there. Well, that hasn't really happened. On today's video, we're going to explore the truth, the reality of the so-called new Miami, Tampa, Florida. Is it really the case? On today's video, we're going to dig deeper into that notion and see if Tampa really does have that kind of potential. Is Tampa really becoming the new Miami, a destination for people who drive luxury cars and buy condominiums with water views? According to the internet, it is. Tampa is becoming the new Miami, the destination for people who are affluent to flock to. But is it really the case, or is this just another real estate gimmick? On today's video, we're going to look at some real information about Tampa and about Miami to understand if this is really the case. Without a doubt, skylines and skyscrapers are a symbol of an up-and-coming city. In the case of Tampa, the tallest building was built back in 1992. However, in the case of Miami, since the year 2020, 7 new buildings have gone up in downtown Miami and vicinity that are taller than the tallest building in Tampa. There's no doubt that after COVID, Tampa built some momentum, but at the moment, that momentum is practically smoked away and it doesn't exist. In fact, I think that moving forward, Tampa's going to face some serious troubles when it comes to its growth and development. Miami's zoning allows for practically anything to be built. There's talks of a new skyscraper finally coming to Tampa that will break the record set back in 1992 of Tampa's tallest building. However, there's already some issues. Nearby, there's an airport, and they're claiming that this tall skyscraper being set for Tampa's downtown will actually be a safety issue, which means that because of zoning reasons, perhaps Tampa will never actually get any more skyscrapers like Miami. Sure, there's a lot of new things going into downtown Tampa. The downtown has transformed. But can it compare to what's going on in Miami? That's absolutely impossible. Miami has nearly 30 buildings that are taller than the tallest building in Tampa. And this isn't just because of COVID. In 2019, Miami got a new super skyscraper. The Residence by Armani Casa, taller than anything in downtown Tampa. But it wasn't the only skyscraper that went into Miami in that year. Standing at 700 feet, the Paramount Miami World Trade Center also went in 2019. Also in 2019, in Brickell, the 5th tallest building in Florida was placed in Miami, in Brickell, using the Latin American financing. Like I've said many times on our YouTube channel, much of the growth and development in Miami has been Latin American money, while growth and development in Tampa has more to do with the United States, and since 1992, nobody's scared to put a taller skyscraper in Tampa with American money. Just in 2019, before COVID, 4 super tall skyscrapers broke the sky in Miami, taller than anything that exists in Tampa. And the same thing happened in 2018 and in 2017 and 2016. Basically, Miami has been on a roll with putting up skyscrapers in its skyline, and there's many more in the works right now. Claiming that Tampa is on track to be the next Miami is a vast overstatement. Even in the aftermath of the last recession, 2009 and 2010, Miami was putting up skyscrapers taller than anything in Tampa. Tampa's tallest building was put back in 1992. That's a long time since anybody cares to make an impactful development project in the skyline of the city, and that signifies a lot. There simply isn't that much big money put behind Tampa. The money is going to continue to go to Miami for a few reasons that are pretty obvious to anybody that lives in Florida. On Monday, the low temperature in Tampa will be 49 degrees. Miami will wake up to 17 degrees warmer. So people in Tampa are going to have to bring out the sweaters, but people in Miami will be able to go for a morning walk, and that's the difference weather-wise from Tampa and Miami. Sure, the daily high temperatures may be about the same, but when a cold front comes through, you're not going to go for a walk in downtown Tampa, but you'll be fine in downtown Miami. It's a small but significant temperature difference that dictates why Miami will be the destination for years to come. And that's only air temperature. When you look at water temperature, it's even more significant. Water temperature today in Miami is 79 degrees, while in Tampa it's 68 degrees. That means that in December you can literally go for a swim in Miami, something you're not going to pull off in Tampa. Anybody who lives in Florida knows that during the summer, the southern part of the state is a ghost town. It's only during the winter time when people venture into Florida, and it's for those months of the year that the real wealthy and affluent people live here. After all, those are not year-round residents of Florida. They got their homes in other states. Those people are only down here for a few months, and they're going to be in the warmest destinations, and Tampa simply isn't it. If you're on a boat in downtown Miami, in 3 miles you can be in the open ocean. From Club Space in downtown Miami to the sands of South Beach is 4 miles. From downtown Tampa to Clearwater Beach is a whopping 41 minutes and 25 miles. Sprinkle in some snowbird tourists to that commute and you're talking at over an hour. I'm not trying to talk down on Tampa. Tampa's a great city that has some great attributes. Some of Tampa's attributes make it better than Miami for day-to-day living. May it be the layout of the city, traffic congestion, and other things to do in the area. There's a lot of great things about Tampa that make Tampa uniquely a city that may be more attractive to live in year-round. But as far as being the new Miami, the destination for wealthy snowbirds and stuff like that, basically the people that end up in Tampa are the ones that can't afford Miami, or the ones that are so close-minded that they can't accept Miami's Hispanic overwhelming culture, which saturates the air in Miami. Miami has its own vibe, and Tampa does too. These are both unique cities, and they're great. And there's things about Tampa that make it great. Tampa, for example, is a predominantly English-speaking city. Miami-Dade is still like 70% Hispanic, and overwhelmingly people there speak Spanish. So for day-to-day everyday year-round living, Tampa seems like a more logical choice for a lot of people, not only for convenience but also for economy. And did I just say economy? See, economy isn't what dictates where rich people live. Rich people and affluent people and people that are trending aren't dictated by the economy. And it's clear fact, undeniable, that Tampa is a more economical option. If Tampa was better, it would be more expensive, and it isn't. And it isn't going to be for a lot of reasons. So this notion that Tampa's the next and up-and-coming Miami isn't really truth. Is it starting to look more like Miami? Yes, definitely. Is it starting to feel more like Miami? Absolutely. But to compare and say that Tampa is the new Miami, there's nothing to prove it. At least on the development side, nothing even nearly comes close. Again, since 1992, Tampa has not shattered its Skyline building limit. The new plans for a skyscraper in downtown Tampa already look like they're nulled by the fact that people are coming up with zoning issues. By the way, a problem that has plagued the west coast of Florida now for decades is that every single time that somebody wants to put anything in Florida's west coast, you got a certain group of people, not to describe them, in commission, in city, in all these offices, and these people cater to the elderly, people who don't want to see a skyscraper, don't want to see growth and development. That is why Southwest Florida and the whole coast of West Florida hasn't really seen any significant development, and it's not going to, because you have a group of people here that squash the plans of every single development, and that means that despite the fact there may be a desire for somebody to put in a skyscraper in Tampa to do something big for the city, it isn't going to happen. And if it does happen, they got to fight all these local agencies, all these people, and all these offices that are trying to find zoning requirements or issues with these buildings going up, and you don't become a world-renowned city with that type of environment. It's an environment that's dictated by the elderly and the retired people. So if the young, hip people that want to have an incredible city want to do it in Tampa, they're going to have to jump through too many hoops, and developers aren't going to go through with it. They're not going to lose millions of dollars all of a sudden because all of a sudden a bunch of old people don't want to see a skyscraper. So cities like Tampa and Sarasota might feel like baby Miamis, and hey, there may be a draw to somebody who wants to live in a Miami, but not that big of a Miami. Understandable. You get a little bit of the flavor, you get a little bit of that touch, but you get in the full package? Never. It's not happening here. And by the way, a football team and a sandwich isn't culture. Tampa is culturally obsolete. Miami is a hub of international culture. Has been for decades, will probably continue to be. Nobody's moving to Tampa to make a point other than they can't afford Miami. And again, I'm not trying to knock on Tampa because it's a great city for its own merits, but the merits that people are trying to attribute to Tampa right now simply don't add up. It takes everybody in local offices getting on board with letting developers do whatever the crap they want, and that simply isn't going to happen in Tampa. Sure, they might allow mining companies to do whatever they want, contaminating Tampa Bay to the point where it's practically dead at this point, but Tampa doesn't cater to developers. It caters to mining companies. It caters to phosphate stacks. Now, despite the fact that Tampa and Miami as a metropolitan area, here's a word some people didn't learn in the 3rd grade, metropolitan area. Let's see if we can understand this, because some of you guys, it's hard to believe that people don't know what a metropolitan area is, but there's people out there that are going to start disputing my information because they don't know what a metropolitan area is. The Miami metropolitan area is Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County. That is about 6,000 square miles or so. Now, the Tampa metro area is the same exact size, but it encompasses many more counties: Manatee, Polk, Hillsborough, Pinellas, Pasco, even Citrus. So geographically, the square mileage available for both of these cities in their metropolitan area is at around 6,000 square miles. That's quite a bit. So the Tampa metropolitan area is 6,193 square miles. The Miami metropolitan area is 6,137 square miles. So as far as landmass goes, these two cities are literally dealing with the same amount of land. However, in the case of Miami, the entire area is flanked by the Florida Everglades. That means that most of the land in Miami metropolitan area is actually reserved. It's preserved. It cannot be developed. In fact, they can't even put roads through there, meaning that most of Miami-Dade, despite having the same landmass of the Tampa metropolitan area, it's a metropolitan area that practically has nowhere to grow but upwards. In the case of Tampa, it wouldn't make sense for Tampa to congeal all these skyscrapers in the downtown of a city that has so much space to expand. Tampa's urban core doesn't have the constraints of conservation land, which means that the population density is much more thinly spread out than in Miami, where everybody has to be pushed along the coastline. So weather and geographical barriers is what created the Miami that we have today. A situation that isn't going to unfold in Tampa because Tampa still has plenty of places to grow. Now here's where things get dicey. Despite the fact Miami is much more densely populated, somehow they managed to develop Miami better, and Miami actually has better infrastructure than Tampa. Now, at first thought, you would think, well, Tampa has more land to expand, it should have more possibilities to install infrastructure, but that isn't the case. While the city limits of Tampa have a grid pattern and some highways, as soon as you leave the city limits of Tampa, infrastructure here is dicey. All the roads go in different directions. Sometimes you have to get on highways, expressway, toll roads, bridges. If you're heading west towards the beaches, it's all these crazy bridges and all these wild directions. Despite the fact that there's north to south highways, there aren't many east to west in Pinellas County. Despite the fact in downtown Tampa, the zoning isn't allowing for skyscrapers, when you go to East Tampa, you have a mix of every type of zoning you could think of. It's bizarre. One moment you're on an expressway, the next you're in a gated community, then you're in a commercial park. Let me just show you guys in East Tampa the nightmare of infrastructure that exists. All this that you're about to see is within like the same area of East Tampa. Check this out. And by the way, despite the fact these are gated communities here, you also have bad neighborhoods all in the mix. On this particular evening, we even heard gunshots. So here in East Tampa, you got all these gated communities like this one, but they're close to bad neighborhoods where you can hear gunshots at night. You drive 3 minutes away, you have commercial and industrial. Drive about another mile, and then you have some quote-unquote luxury apartments. Of course, any major intersection out here has a gas station on every corner. Then, of course, that's all diced up by Interstate 75, Interstate 4, the Selman, and 301, which spaghetti around in all directions. I mean, just look at the zoning mess that is East Tampa. Basically, the only way to get out here is through major highways, expressways, or state roads. There's literally no secondary roads. Scattered everywhere are commercial, industrial, railroad tracks. I mean, it's like the worst urban zoning nightmare that exists outside of Houston. I mean, Tampa is literally in the process of building a bridge next to a bridge. And then you have the area near the airport, which looks something like Washington, D.C. because of airspace restrictions. I'm going to guess there's probably like a 200-foot height restriction near the airport, so this whole entire area looks like Washington, D.C. From the general location of Tampa's downtown compared to Miami, to the weather, to the infrastructure, to the urban development, there is so much that will prevent Tampa from anything near what Miami is. Tampa hasn't had the same achievements of Miami. It hasn't had the same growth. Now, when I say growth, take that with a grain of salt, because what happens in Southwest Florida and probably New York City and San Francisco the same, is that when an area gets really expensive, the population density starts to decrease because you no longer have 10 people living in a house, but you have one wealthy, affluent person who buys an apartment that they don't live in, so the population density decreases. This happens in places like Naples Park, some wealthy parts of Miami along the water, where the population density starts to decrease as development moves in, because now you don't have 50 apartments, you just have 5 rich people living in mansions. So as an area gets really expensive, the population density sometimes can decrease as rich people force low-income people out. That's what's happening in Miami. So when population density hits a certain point and prices appreciate, the density starts to decrease even though there's development. So take that with a grain of salt. Tampa might on paper look like it's growing faster than Miami, but when it comes to price appreciation and value of land, it really isn't. And of course, that's not really reflected very well with the prices of single family homes, because you're talking about new high-rise buildings with luxury condos into the millions. So what happens in these large urban areas along the coast like Miami is that they'll knock down an apartment complex to build a McMansion or a luxury condo, but those people aren't even there year-round, so it lowers the population density. A good example is a duplex. You got a duplex where you got 4 families living in it. They knock that down and build a McMansion, but then nobody's living there, so that reduces the population density. A while back, during COVID, a bald-headed YouTuber made a video saying that Miami had this area, North Miami, which had been losing population density because people are moving out. So not only did their population density decrease, but so did their population in general. So he made a video saying that people were moving out of North Miami because North Miami is no longer attractive. Now, this is like in the middle of COVID when everybody's buying real estate in North Miami. Now, this YouTuber actually has a degree in economy. Shake my head. But the real reason the population density and population in general was decreasing in North Miami is because they would knock down 50 apartments to build 8 luxury condos. So now you went from having 800 people living on a piece of land to having 40 that are there half the year. One of the most frustrating things about trying to teach people about the economy and the real estate market here in Florida is when people like that, who claim that they have a degree and claim that they know what the crap they're talking about, but they have absolutely no real life experience on why things happen on the ground. You ever see these top 10 lists? The top 10 best places to live in Florida. The top 10 best places to live in the United States. The safest places to live with your family. The best communities for people with kids. All those online lists are paid for ads by developers who have real estate in those places and are trying to funnel you there by these top 10 lists. I don't know if you guys, my audience, have realized it, but most of the top 10 lists that exist on the internet are actually not real analytical lists. They're just developers that are trying to rank their cities higher by paying somebody to make these lists. That's why I broke the internet when I started doing my top 10 lists, exposing the real top 10s of places, because everything that was out there was really just paid promotion by realtors and developers. So if you're on your phone today and you say, oh, this community in Florida has been ranked the best in healthcare, best in retirement, dude, that's an ad by a developer. That's somebody who has a financial interest in that city trying to funnel you there by making you believe that those places rank higher. And the sad thing is, a lot of those places, well, if they were actually good, they wouldn't need the promotion. They sell themselves. Like Miami doesn't need promotion. Everybody knows what the deal is with Miami. But in the case of Tampa, it's a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more deceptive of marketing, because people are trying to convince you that this is an up-and-coming place, but there's no factual information to go along with it. Just this week, I practically spent the entire week working in Tampa. It's a great city. And you know what? For 80% of people moving to Florida, Tampa is probably a better option than Miami. But that doesn't change the fact that Miami is better. If you tell me right now that you have $2 million disposable and you're moving to Florida, the Miami metro area would probably offer you at that price point the options that you want and that you can enjoy the most. Tampa is more like a cookie cutter option, and that's okay because not everybody's a millionaire. I'm certainly not a millionaire. Hey, I'm stuck in the Tampa metro area. Would I rather live in Miami? Absolutely, but I can't afford it. This subsidizes what I really want, which is Miami. You know, when I first moved to the Tampa metropolitan area, I really wanted to live in Miami, but I simply couldn't afford it. And I was a little skeptical about Tampa. Tampa's definitely warming up to me. I'm starting to enjoy working here and being here. And I can tell you that for a fact, economically, it's much more feasible than Miami. There's no question about that. And I do believe that Tampa is probably more feasible than Orlando for sure. These days, Jacksonville used to be better. I think Tampa's now starting to be better than Jacksonville economically, although it's probably a close call. Jacksonville's definitely not what it used to be economically. I mean, for the average person, Tampa really is more practical than Miami. It's better fitted than Orlando. It's got a lot more to offer than Jacksonville. For one, safety. Jacksonville's biggest problem has been safety for the longest. Tampa's a fairly safe city. Most people relocating to Tampa from the Northeast are going to find that Tampa is considerably safer than most cities. Tampa and St. Petersburg are at about national average for crime rates, and most large cities easily double or triple that, meaning that you can move from a rural area in the north that's safe to Tampa, and despite the fact you're in a big city, crime and safety is about the same. So Tampa is definitely a safe city. Most of Florida's large cities are safe, with the exception of Jacksonville. As a person who spends a lot of time in Tampa and a lot of time in Miami, and I've never lived in either city, I've worked in both cities quite a bit, so I'm familiar with these cities, but I don't have any prejudice against one or the other. I can tell you that Miami is by far a more spectacular city, and if you have money, there's no comparison, and I think most of us know that. But to say that Tampa is becoming the new Miami really is a far stretch. Tampa is growing like any other city in the southern region should. I mean, really, when you compare Tampa's analytics to Houston or Austin, it falls behind in growth and development. Those cities are growing at a much faster pace than Tampa. They got more skyscrapers, more growth, more development, and they probably got a better job market, with the exception of Houston, which is more affordable, so it kind of plays out. Of course, Texas doesn't have the coastlines that Tampa does. Clearwater Beach, St. Pete Beach. Tampa hasn't really outpaced Austin. It hasn't outpaced Houston. It hasn't outpaced places like Myrtle Beach, so there's a lot of other places in the South that are also seeing growth and development. Tampa is the 17th largest metropolitan area in the United States. Only Dallas and Houston are larger metro areas with more growth. That makes it the third largest and growing metropolitan area in the United States, and that's not a bad place to be. Miami has a larger population, but its growth is a little bit slower than Tampa's. But it's not because more people don't want to live in Miami. They just simply can't afford it, and the job market there is brutal. Similar to what we stated earlier in the video, because of the weather and geography increments of Miami, it's always going to be more lucrative and attractive as a place for snowbirds and tourists than it will as a place for people to live year-round. Tampa offers a much better platform for people looking to move to the state of Florida than Miami in general context. For people looking to relocate to Tampa and expect a Miami experience, they may find some disappointment. Tampa definitely falls short of Miami. However, the city still has large venue halls, it still has large events, concerts, sporting teams. There's plenty of things to do in the Tampa area, and it is a great place to relocate to in the United States. But it's not going to become a Miami anytime soon. And in fact, Tampa is a unique city. It has its own wave, it's got its own vibe, it's got its own movement. It's got completely different economical and development situations than Miami. So trying to compare Tampa to Miami or say that Tampa is becoming the new Miami is very misleading. I would much rather say that Tampa is a unique city that offers a completely different experience, and perhaps that in itself is a good thing. But it's definitely not the new Miami. In some ways, you could argue that Tampa is better than Miami. For example, crime and safety. Now, I've Uber driven in Miami and I've Uber driven in Tampa, and it definitely feels like Miami has become a much more crimey city lately. That wasn't the case a few years ago, but it certainly is now. The exodus of Hispanics from Miami will likely mean a new influx of Americans to a city that hasn't had that influx in a while, which means that perhaps Miami can see even further growth and development in the future that Tampa probably won't be able to enjoy. I think the reason people are starting to compare Tampa to Miami is because the South Florida cultural region has now expanded into Central Florida, and Central Florida is now part of the South Florida cultural region. A video that I'm making a topic about in the future that will definitely disappoint a few people. But Miami's growth and development is marked by super skyscrapers, super high buildings, something that Tampa hasn't done since 1992. And the plans for one single skyscraper in Tampa don't seem like they're going to go anywhere with the current zoning situation. Now, St. Petersburg, on the other hand, now has the tallest building in its skyline, and it's a recent build, making it the tallest building on the west coast of Florida. Take a look at Tampa's sad and depressing skyline, which since the early 90s hasn't incorporated any newer buildings. It's almost as sad as Detroit, Michigan, except for Detroit, Michigan actually got some new skyscrapers, which Tampa hasn't. No, bless your heart, Tampa, Florida, you're definitely not becoming the new Miami. Miami has a lot of big buildings in its skyline, and it's got some beautiful warm weather. Imagine this being the skyline to your city that hasn't changed in decades and thinking that you're going to be the new Miami. Bless their hearts, they just haven't traveled. Or maybe they're getting paid to say that by somebody who wants to continue to beef up Tampa's real estate market, which is right now in a horrible condition. The aftermath of hurricanes has left the coastline completely desolate. It's a wasteland. I don't have to say, you guys have seen my videos along Tampa Bay's coastline. It's a complete freaking mess. Things definitely aren't looking good in the Tampa area. Now, on the northern edge of Tampa's metropolitan area, places like Newport Richey, they're having a lot of growth. Places like Zephyr Hills and Dade City, the northern outskirts of the metropolitan area, these used to be communities that were kind of stagnant for many years. They're starting to see a lot of growth and development, and the vibe's getting a little bit better. But that's because people can't afford South Florida. So as South Florida continues to get more expensive because of Miami and its cultural influence zone expanding upwards into South Central Florida, now because of affordability issues, people are moving further into the central part of the state, which has brought a lot of growth and development to this part of the state, and it's brought a new vibe, a new air to the area of growth. But keep in mind that these are people relocating from South Florida, moving further north, looking for affordability, and it's actually become an option for people relocating to Florida that can no longer afford the southern tip of the state. So what's been happening over the last few years, it's not that these areas are becoming more like Miami, it's that Miami has left these places so far behind in its growth and development that a lot of people have had to push into other parts of Florida, which has made somewhat of a Miami vibe push further into the state, bringing life to places that before were dead. So Miami's cultural influence zone continues to spread, making the Tampa area now feel more like Miami, but that's only because people can't afford Miami, and that's going to continue to happen, perhaps even at a faster rate than before. Only time will tell. Checking out from the Tampa metropolitan area. More than calling this area the new Miami, I would call it the old Miami, because everybody that's from Miami has had to relocate here so they can afford to stay in the state.